to my stretches. So despite having enough soft tissue mobility, the reason why my hip joint is not as mobile as an elite Olympic lifter who practices snatch and clean and jerk, and that is because of this anatomical difference. Now there is nothing I can do to change the shape of my socket. It is God given. So what I have to do is I stand in a way where my toes are slightly pointed out. Now because of this, I have to direct my knees in the direction of my toes. Now you can see that the space between my knees at the start and the space between my knees at the bottom is different. There is a lot of space between my knees. Now why do I have to do that? So anatomically, when I sit down, so the angle at the hip joint is getting shorter. So that's called flexion. But at the same time, my thigh bone is going away from the center line. So if there is an imaginary center line, my thigh bone is going away from it. So when I sit down, there is not only flexion at the hip, but there is slight amount of abduction. Now why do I have to modify that form in such a way? So people with shallow socket, they have a lot of freedom of mobility. So when they want to take their knee and hold it close to the chest, they can easily take it in one straight line. But people like me, I have to slightly deviate my foot and take it up. So you see, taking it straight up and taking it to the side and coming up. So although I'm standing on one leg, but deviating my foot slightly out and taking it up, it made it look easy. So watch me again from the side profile. Now if I keep my toes pointed straight, I've kept my toes pointed straight, I'll have to track my knees in the direction of toes. So my knees will start hinging forward and my hip, to counterbalance my body weight, have to hinge backwards. But watch what happens to my spine, my entire setup. Watch. I am able to sit down. My glutes are still below the knee. But watch what has happened to my spine. Although I am trying to keep my spine as erect as possible, but the spine is into slight flexion. So, because I have got deeper hip ball socket, if I use stance where my toes are pointed straight, I am able to sit down thanks to my soft tissue mobility, but my spine goes into slight flexion. So what would happen? My legs can become stronger, but my spine will be a limiting factor. So if I want to progress and get stronger in squat, my legs won't give up, but my spine certainly will. So what modification I have to do? Watch. The moment I point my toes slightly out, see what difference does it make? Watch my spine now. As my knees starts going out and forward, which is in the direction of my toes, my pelvic girdle does not have to move backwards. Watch again. The pelvic drops mainly like an arrow. It drops like an arrow straight down. Watch. See the integrity of my spine. It is nice and tight. In fact, I am able to sit deeper while maintaining neutral spine. So you can clearly see, because of the differences in anatomical setup, I have to modify my form. And once I learned that, I started implementing that to teach my clients. So I clearly remember, I'm sure Tanvi is watching it, Tanvi Ragnekar. Now Tanvi is quite a tall girl. She must be 5'7.5" or close to 5'8". Now Tanvi, with longer thigh bone and relatively shorter torso. Again, a classic example of long legs. Now when she used to squat, she never could use squat properly. I had to modify it and she could squat flawlessly now. Another client of mine, again Priyanka Shalini. She has been training with me since about a year and a half, or close to about a year and a half, sparingly. And she is a classic example of somebody who has been exercising for the last, I would say, 8 to 10 years, but no coach could make her squat properly. I'm not trying to demean and I'm not trying to criticize any other coaches, but they could never figure out why she could not squat properly. And it wasn't like she was stiff, it wasn't like she was lacking mobility. It has to do something with her limbs. Now, besides the setup of ball and socket, there is one more thing that will decide how your toes should be placed. So whether pointed straight or pointed out. And that is called a slight technical term which I'll repeat twice. That's called anthropometrical symmetry. I repeat what I said, anthropometrical symmetry. Now, anthropometry is a science of measurements. That means the proportion between your limbs, the proportion of your upper arm bone to your forearms, the proportion of your thigh to your lower leg. So, it isn't about how short you are or how tall you are. So, you could be 6 feet, but you could have proportion limb length. And that proportionate limb length is called anthropometrical symmetry, balance. And you could be shorter, but with uneven proportion. And that is called anthropometrical asymmetry. Now, you don't have to stand yourself with a measuring tape and to calculate mathematical formulas. No, you simply have to squat down and get up and see, record your videos from front and side and see what makes you look better. And rather making it look better, you should feel comfortable and graceful. So another client of mine, Mr. Sandeep Nag. Now Sandeep is 6 feet tall, 1.5 inch taller than me. But Sandeep, correct, despite being taller than me, he had more proportionate legs than me. What I mean by that, despite I am being 5'10.5", my thigh bone and the hip socket. So the way I used to squat, I never made Sandeep squat that way. That's because his limbs were nicely and proportionate. In fact, the classic example what I want to take, whom you everybody know, is Mr. Rahul Bhatt. Now Rahul is a phenomenally strong person. Now there are many reasons why I admire Rahul. In fact, I consider him to be one of my mentors. He is like a big brother to me. And there are a lot of things I have learned from him. Probably I have to make another video talking how grateful I am to him. But leave that aside. He is around 5'11", 6 feet tall. But Rahul has proportionate limb length. And although I haven't seen his x-rays, but I've seen him squatting for so many years. The way he squats, it makes it look like he's squatting as if a baby is sitting down and getting up flawlessly. And that is purely because of the structure of his hip socket. So despite Rahul is taller than me, but because of his hip joint, the socket is slightly shallower, he could point his toe slightly straighter, relatively straighter, and squat down to the same depth what I'm squatting now. Now there is another person whom I like to mention because I know these people personally. So one is Mr. Pranay Zagade. Now he is a fitness manager at I Think Fitness where I freelance my coach. Beautiful squatter, an excellent human, but the most gifted thing he ever got from nature is the proportionate limbs. If you see him squatting, he would sit down, get up within a blink of an eye. I'm not praising his explosiveness here because his limbs are proportionate, plus his hip joint mobility and his anatomical makeup, he is meant to squat. His body is designed to squat flawlessly. Now there are factors that we can control and there are factors that we cannot control. So the controllable factor here is the joint mobility, the soft tissue mobilization. But the factor that we cannot control is the anatomical makeup. So, simply put, irrespective of your height, just sense your limb length proportion. Just squat in both ways. Squat with toes pointed straight and squat with toes slightly pointed out. And sense which movement or which setup gives you maximum range of motion and most importantly, maximum sense of stability. So, you saw me, I squatted in both techniques, toe pointed straight and toes pointed down. In both cases, I could sit down comfortably. What I mean by that, I got full range of motion. So is that the only factor to determine which stance is better for me? No. So range of motion is one factor, and the most important factor is how comfortable you sit down. And second thing, how balanced you feel, how tighter you feel at the bottom. So I could feel that my spine is slightly slackened when the toes were pointed straight. But as soon as I started pointing my toes out and tracked my knees in the direction of my toes, I could sit down like an arrow. My torso was far more tighter and upright. So I am not justifying an upright torso. You cannot keep your torso upright. Now this is what I call, let me elaborate that. This is what I call an upright torso. This is not only upright, but at the same time this is neutral. Now this is slackened. So I have lost the spinal curvature. I have maintained my spinal curvature. Now at the bottom of the squat, watch. At the bottom of the squat, I am not upright. My upper body, my torso is at slight angle. Now if I want to keep it upright, I would fall back. I would fall back because my center of gravity, that is my body, is going out of base. So the base of support is the area between my feet. So the reason why the body was at slight angle, that was purely because it was maintaining balance. Now watch here. So if you sit down on a chair, now this is what I call an upright upper body. Shoulders are above the hip. Can you see it? Yes. But my legs right now are weightless. So even if I take my legs off, see, I can take my one leg off. That's because the structure, that upper body structure, is supported by the chair. So that's my base of support right now. But each one of us, when we want to get off the chair, see what we do. Unknowingly, we first push forward and then stand up. I repeat what we did. So nobody sits up like this. So nobody shoots up like an arrow. We first get our torso on the base of support. Now this is what I call leaning forward and not slouching forward. I repeat, leaning forward, slouching forward. So in a case of squat, when you are at the bottom of the squat, you are leaning forward, you are not slouching forward. So you lean forward so that body can sense that the load is on the base of support, and now even if the chair is pulled off, I won't fall. I can stand up because chair is no longer supporting me. So the squat 101 was activation of tripod. Sense your 3 points, point A, B and C, and consider your foot like your palm. How we grip things from the palm. You grip the floor. Watch. Once you place it, you grip the floor through your feet. All 3 points are activated. It's like you are trying to actively push the ground down. Now that activation of tripod, it sets your foundation right. You sense that your body is not shifting on point B, your body is not shifting laterally, it's not moving forward, it's not moving backwards. You are nice and solid. Then maintenance of the foot arch. So once all 3 points are activated, the foot arch has to be maintained. Second, positioning of the toes, like I said about, straight or pointed out. Whichever you select, make them solid. Now, the third part, which is another interesting part, before you start sitting down. So I'm not teaching you how to sit down yet. I'm just talking about how to stand. So the first point was the distance between heels, which is comfortable as per your joint structure and your base of support, and then positioning of the toes. Third thing would be activation of the tripod. Now the fourth thing is what I like to call spreading of the floor or tearing the floor apart. What I mean by that, now imagine there is a towel pressed between my 2 toes. So the towel is crunched and I have to spread the towel out. This is called spreading the towel out, or maybe tearing the towel out. Now this towel, if I want to spread it out without shifting my toes, so watch, my toes are already pointed out. I am no longer shifting my toe out. Watch, I'm simply trying to spread the floor apart. Now when I try to spread the floor apart, you can see, watch. Yeah, now I am at the screen.